I've known Adrian for about 4 or 5 years. I've worked with Atkins for just under 20 odd years. One of my oldest clients, one of my best and favorite clients. And Adrian has been particularly exciting to know. We've worked together on the leadership program. I followed him as they built this digital capability within Atkins. Atkins is an amazing business. These are the guys who brought you the London Olympics. These are the guys who do not even break into a sweat when they're consulting and building multi-billion-pound business buildings and systems across places like Dubai. I mean, they're engineers, but they execute, they're effective, and in fact, they're probably one of the best distributed companies in the world. So Adrian is very, very much part of this. He's leading the digital process. He's been incredibly innovative, and he's going to share some of this with you. Everybody, please, round of applause for Adrian Malone. You have to clap your hands together. There isn't a button.
Why not?
Great.
Eddie, thank you. After an introduction like that, I think it's time for me to leave. It's not going to get better than that. Okay, so I need to get to the console, don't I? I don't seem to have the option.
Yep.
So
you should click on the console itself or slideshow manager.
come back. There it is. Excellent. Okay, let me just get set up, and then what I'm doing. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yep, we
There's
can hear
a strange noise in
perfectly.
the background, so you can hear me. Okay?
Not anymore.
Excellent, fantastic. Yeah, so Eddie, thanks for the fantastic introduction. That kind of sets the bar quite high, doesn't it? My role in Atkins, I work across a number of things, but the big focus for me at the moment is around digital, and I'm one of many people in Atkins who's working on digital at the moment. It seems that over time, all of us are becoming involved in digital in some shape or form. And I think it's something that we really recognise is changing the world in which we work. It's changing. As Eddie said, we build stuff, we build infrastructure, and we're recognizing that increasingly that infrastructure needs to be digital and it needs to work in a digital world, and the way that we deliver it needs to be digital. So we talk about digital all the time, and it's become, I noticed on the hopes and fears that I think it was Alistair says, learn what digital isn't these days, and and I think that's kind of my world at the moment. Everything seems to be digital, and we talk about it all the time. And I have to say, we use it to describe a whole bunch of different things. So I'm going to, just today, I'm going to talk not too much, hopefully. I'm going to run through a little bit about what digital means and kind of put that into a bit of context. Talk about what digital means for organizations like Atkins, and hopefully it'll resonate with your organizations and the ones that you work with as well. And talk about it in particular, what it means in terms of how we go about the kind of skills we need, and about how we kind of interact with the world and with the people around us. So not too much technology, hopefully much more about people and what digital means in terms of what impact it has on us. And you can't escape it. How many people have seen stories in the media over the last year or two, certainly, where everybody seems to be talking about robots and algorithms and bits of software? And the robots are going to take all our jobs, right? So has everyone seen this stuff? So, robots and bits of software, artificial intelligence and algorithms are going to replace huge numbers, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of jobs over the next 3, 5, 10 years. And there's lots of tools and questions and posts out there about, will a robot take your job? Will a robot take my job? And I think probably it will over time. We've already had Leo turn into a robot on this session, so he's well ahead of the rest of us. So what we're looking at is robots taking our jobs over time, and by robots I mean bits of software as well. And the bit at the bottom is the really scary bit. So we're talking about hopes and fears. Here's some real fears. That over time the robots will build smarter robots. The software will write smarter robots, write smarter software, and eventually that will exceed human cognition. So in the end, we'll end up with bits of software that's programmed smarter versions of itself until it's so smart and so fast and so interconnected that it doesn't really need us anymore, and we can't compete with it. And at that point, I guess you either end up in a utopian future where the robots take pity on us and decide that they're going to nurture us and look after us and allow us to enjoy our unlimited leisure time, or they're going to see us as a huge threat to the survival of the planet, or just unnecessary and get rid of us all. So from a fear's perspective, that's a kind of bleak view of the world, isn't it? But I know it's one that kind of worries a lot of people in terms of what is digital going to mean. And I think it's probably, I wasn't around at the time, I'm not quite old enough, but it's probably kind of how it felt when we were going through the Industrial Revolution. And a lot of those kind of old craft and manual based jobs were becoming replaced by machines. I guess we're in a similar but different phase now. So that's kind of bleak, and that's kind of a lot of fears. But then there's this other view of the world, which is, so there's a report by McKinsey, and this is just one of many studies. So McKinsey reckon that we're going to need 1.5 million additional managers and analysts in the United States alone who can ask the right questions, consume the results of analysis of big data effectively. So I think what we're seeing is we're seeing a shift. We're seeing some roles starting to disappear, being automated or becoming obsolete over time, and we're seeing some other roles which will increasingly be in demand. And the big challenge I think we're going to see is not robots replacing our jobs. I think what we're going to see as a real challenge is that as the new roles get created and there's a need for new skills and new capabilities, what we're really going to struggle with as organizations is being able to find people who've got the new skills that we need in the numbers we need and as quickly as we need, whether that be through recruiting new people or whether that's through training and development of people. And as individuals, we face a massive challenge in terms of how we learn and how we develop to continue to be relevant in the new world that we're beginning to see emerge around us. So there's some fears around robots taking our world over and us all becoming obsolete, and then there's some real hope in terms of some new areas where we can start to exercise our skills. And actually, from my perspective, I think what's really interesting is it's not about the technology. I think over time we'll get an opportunity to think again about what it means to be human. What's our purpose in the world around us? I think there's some really good big questions that we can answer. Maybe not today, but maybe on another occasion. So just to kind of dive into that in a little bit more detail. So this is a study from the World Economic Forum. So there's a paper where they looked at, amongst other things, the change in demand for work-related skills between 2015 and 2020. So we're kind of right in the middle of that, aren't we? We're 2017, so we're a good way into that. And they looked at skills that were in decline. I'm an optimist, so I brought up the slide which looks at the skills that they're saying are going to be increasingly in demand. And you can see there the types of skills that they describe that I think we're going to need. The top one is cognitive abilities, but also things like system skills, complex problem solving, and ability to kind of work with content. And just picking one of those out, if I can just get it to click. So just picking one of those out. So cognitive abilities, what do they mean by cognitive abilities? Well, they mean a whole bunch of things. So they talk about cognitive flexibility, and that's the ability to generate and use different sets of rules for combining and grouping things in different ways. Or to put that in plain English, making sense of the stuff around us, making sense of lots of information, making sense of lots of data and lots of insights, and being able to group things together and define the rules about how we organize the world around us. So when everything's in flux, and I think things are at the moment, then those skills become incredibly important. Creativity, I think, speaks for itself. Logical reasoning, I think, again, speaks for itself. Problem sensitivity, I think, is an interesting one. So that's not about solving problems, but it's about being able to recognize that something is wrong or likely to go wrong, and being able to anticipate where we might need to intervene in some way. Mathematical reasoning is all about the ability to choose the right mathematical method or formula to solve a problem. So not necessarily being able to do the sums, because guess what? The machines are going to do that for us. But actually being able to pick the right way to solve the problem is going to be increasingly important. And certainly I see this in the world that I work in. Visualization, so the ability to imagine how something will look after it's moved around or after its parts are rearranged. So really what we're talking about is a set of skills that allows us to think and synthesize knowledge in new ways and to work with that knowledge in new ways. And I think that's going to be a really interesting place to be over the next 5 or so years. There's going to be a lot of demand in that area and lots of challenges around developing those skills and those abilities. So that's kind of a bit of a view initially in terms of where I think the world is. So I think some roles and some of the things that we used to do and some of our skills that we've traditionally relied upon over the last 10 or 15 years in what I might call the analog world, they're starting to decline, and over time we might see them decline quite rapidly. But other skills around our ability to think and our ability to work with data and information, and most importantly, I think our ability to work with each other, to build relationships and to connect with each other and solve problems and collaborate together, they're going to be incredibly important over the next few years as we move into this kind of digital world. So Eddie mentioned we're going to have lots of opportunities for you to get to know each other and talk and collaborate, and I want to create that first opportunity now.
Just before you do that, Adrian, people have been putting comments in the chat. So if you just glance down them and see whether there's anything you want to comment on. There are loads of questions.
Fantastic.
So just have a quick look before you send us off and just maybe add one sentence or two.
Let's have a quick look down that. So lots of stuff about yellow triangles, so I'll skip through those. Let me see. So, Joe, rubbish at maths. Yeah, good point. I'm not too great myself either. I think the point is that there's a mixture of skills that we're going to need, and not everybody's going to need to be a great mathematician. I think creativity skills are really going to come to the fore. I think what's interesting is that, so before I got into Atkins and before I got into all this work around digital, I spent a lot of time, particularly when I was a student, long ago, looking at learning skills. So how do we learn? How do we think? How do we think creatively? So everything from mind mapping to memory skills to reading, sort of speed reading, etc. And quite a lot of this kind of skills that we were using then were coming from Greek and Roman times. Before we had mass literacy and the ability to kind of remember things through stories and through mnemonics and being able to think creatively and solve problems and hold information in our brains. I think actually those skills start to come back to the fore. I think it's a really interesting time. So it's not necessarily just about maths, it's also about our creative thinking capability as well. And the comments are flying through here, so let me try and get hold of things. So
I'll tell you what, Adrian, do you want to send us off, read them, and then you can comment on them? That might be
sounds like a good idea. Yeah, sounds like a plan. So let's send you all off. So the first breakout, I've talked a little bit about what digital means in terms of the skills that we need as individuals, the skills that organizations are going to need. And I guess what I was pointing at is that to be successful over the last 10 or 15 years in what we'd call the analog world, we've needed to do certain things and work in certain ways. And my sense certainly is that as we move into the digital world, what we need to do to be successful is changing. So the first task is to go off into the breakout groups and to look at what digital means, what it really means for companies and employees.
Okay, great. So to go into the breakout groups, what we're going to do is we're going to go to a place called the large workshop whiteboard. So if you can make it to the large workshop whiteboard, that's where we're going to be working. Don't worry if you can't get there, because in a few seconds somebody will zap you there. Okay, so don't panic. Okay, and then once you face the whiteboard, you'll see that directly in front of you there are green carpets or red carpets. Basically the floor color changes. Have you got that? Red carpets mean that there are zones where you will be able to talk without anyone hearing you. We've got 3 different groups. The group here to the left is if your first name begins with A to E, then you click on the actual sign where it says first name A to E, and that will take you directly to the right place. If your first name, don't go yet, because once you David's gone. Okay, he can't hear us anymore, so I'm gonna have to bring him back. Okay,
sorry.
So, that's okay. So once you click, you'll be gone, and it's quite self-explanatory, and I think somebody will come and help you. So just click on your name where your name is, A to E, F to M, or N to Z, and let's have a discussion. Great, thank you. Okay, let's listen to the second part of Adrian's talk, unless Barbara is ready with something.
Well, I am ready very briefly. That we had a chat about it being much more about intuition, or using and working with intuition in the current world, and the future world, I guess, kind of self-evidently working with data in a more immediate fashion.
Brilliant, thank you.
Interesting.
Great. We missed the team in the middle. Uh,
Yeah.
but I'm sure they don't mind because it'd be nice to have some
Eddie, it's
time towards
Joe.
the end to do some. Joe, yes, go for it.
Yeah, in one sentence. So collaboration, being able to filter information quickly is going to be key, and using the right tools for the right job and knowing what those are. Those were some of the key things we talked about.
That is
Good.
superb. Also, Joe, you said something wonderful about knowing how to access data, but not being sure about how to communicate it. So that's a useful one to
Yes.
share as well. Okay, so Adrian, we may need to go a bit faster because we hadn't anticipated the extra couple of minutes. Everyone, we're at view presentation. If you're not there in a couple of seconds, a horrible thing will happen. You'll get dragged.
Right. So great. So I saw some really good stuff on the board, and we've heard a bit about that. I think Joe, Eddie picked up the fact that you had mentioned about not how to access stuff on YouTube and videos to solve problems, but not necessarily how to put it up there. And it just reminded me of my journey. So last weekend we were coming back from Edinburgh. We had a few days up there as a family. On the way back, both my kids, who are both under 12, had their tablets in the back of the car, and they were filming out the window, and they were recording. They were pretending to be YouTubers, and they were recording their own YouTube videos on the way back. They were never going to post them, but that was a natural part of their lives. They just made me think, actually, if I record a few things like that and practice, then probably I'd feel more comfortable. So I think it's kind of an interesting thing. We've got some new things to learn, and actually we need to kind of play and experiment sometimes in the way that our children do, I think. And the other thing is just around the kind of the whole thing about sort of over 30s and learning skills. I'm right there myself at the moment. I'm having to learn some new ways of thinking and new ways of working, and we're going to have to spend some time out of our comfort zones. I'm afraid. I think that's the only answer. But it can be fun. I promise you, it can be fun. So let's move on. So I just first of all wanted to say a little bit about what digital means in Atkins. So how do we describe digital in Atkins? New ways of working. And some of the key things there are about being agile, being adaptive, and by adaptive I mean being and being experimental. And I think experimental is something that's going to be really key as we kind of go forward in this digital world. So some of you might recognize the 2x2 grid that's buried beyond the lines and blobs on the screen. So this is
Never seen
Eddie,
it
this is
before.
your work. So this is Eddie's model of, I think you originally did this around project management, didn't you, Eddie, in terms of
Yeah,
different
change. Yeah.
types of projects and change and that kind of stuff. And actually, I think it's really relevant to where we are today. So I've borrowed it and I've stolen it with pride from you, Eddie.
I should hope so too. You paid
But with
enough for
full
it.
with full credit to the master. So across the bottom, for those of you who don't know it, across the horizontal axis, sorry, let's go with the vertical axis first of all. So on the vertical axis, we've got what it is we need to do, and that can either be clear or it can be unclear. And then across the horizontal axis, we've got how we go about doing it, whatever it is. And again, that can either be clear, so it can be clear how we go about doing it, or it can be unclear. And I think because in the old world, in this analog world, it's been quite a mature system. So more often than not always, but more often than not, we've been towards the left or we've been towards the bottom of that 2x2 grid. So for example, at the bottom left, we've got where it's clear what we need to do and it's clear how we go about doing it. And that's what Eddie described at the time, which I think paints it beautifully, is painted by numbers. So we write out a list of actions and follow the steps and we follow the instructions and we get the job done. And what I'm seeing is as digital technology starts to disrupt our world and disrupt the jobs that we do and the way we interact with each other and the way we deliver our products and our services, etc., then more often than not, we're finding ourselves increasingly in that top right, where it's not clear what to do and it's not clear how to do it. And that feels pretty uncomfortable a lot of the time. And that's something that Eddie described as being lost in the fog. And I think that's a really so I'm thinking back a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I was working in an HR role and we were delivering a big HR project, so changing the HR services for about 6,000 or 7,000 people right across the UK, and I was part of the team working on that. And it was a huge project, it was a complicated project, but actually it was pretty clear what most of the steps were. We could map them out, we could put a project plan around it, and a few unexpected things happened, but generally we knew what to do and we knew how to do it, and we kind of walked our way through that. When I compare that to what I do now in terms of my role around innovation and digital, I find myself increasingly in a space where it's not obvious what it is we need to do, and it's certainly not obvious how we need to go about it. And so that's a complete transformation for me. And I think the key point is that when you know what to do and you know how to do it, then you measure where you are, you define a plan for how to get to where you want to be, and then you take action. But when you are lost in the fog, you can't measure where you are because you can't see anything. So you can't start the plan because you don't know where you're starting from. So when you're in the fog, the only way to proceed is to take action and then get some feedback. So imagine if you're standing in the fog right now and you're not quite sure which direction to go in or how to go about getting there. So the first thing to do is to take a couple of steps forward and you bump into a wall. And it hurts, but it gives you some feedback. So you think to yourself, okay, I could climb over the wall, but that wall might be on the side of a cliff edge, and that might be painful. So what I'm going to do right now is use that feedback. I've gathered some data, and I'm going to turn around, and I'm going to try a different direction. So you pivot around, and you take a few steps in the other direction, and you find that your feet are starting to get wet. So you get some more feedback from the system, from the environment, and that feedback's telling you that, well, this could mean a number of different things. It could mean that I've just stepped into a puddle, or it could mean that I'm on the edge of a very big lake. And at this point, I don't know which it is because I'm in the fog and I can't see anything. So the next step, I can either turn back again, or I can think, I'll go a little bit further and I'll see what else I can learn. So we take a couple more steps forward, and now the water's up to our knees. And that's starting some feedback there. There's a really big puddle, or I'm stepping into a lake here. And again, I can make a choice. I can either decide to swim across the lake, and I might make it, but remember, I can't see anything because I'm in fog, or I might drown, and that doesn't sound too nice. So I might take a decision at that point to turn back and try and find another path. And in terms of the work that I'm doing these days in Atkins more and more, and what I see happening right across all the customers we work with, and certainly a lot of them, and across a number of the projects we work on, is there's still quite a lot of the stuff on the bottom left, where it's kind of obvious and we know what we're doing. But more and more, we're bumping into this space where it's not obvious what's needed or how to get there. And so we're having to use experimentation to kind of find our way through it. So that's kind of a high level what it looks like. And I just wanted to show you this slide briefly. So this is our innovation flow in Atkins. It's one of the diagrams we use to explain innovation. Don't worry, I know it's too small to see, but the bit I just wanted to kind of draw to your attention is that bit that I've kind of expanded out, which is where experiments occur. So experimentation is now built right into our innovation flow within Atkins. And it's something we're still working hard to socialize across the organization. You know, we've got 18,000 people. It's going to take a while to get everybody familiar with this stuff and comfortable with it. But this is now core to how we approach innovation. And you can see there that we do an experiment and we make a decision at the end of each experiment to either persevere or to pivot. So we have to keep going a little bit further. So we're getting our feet wet and we want to step a bit more further in and see whether it's a lake or a puddle, or we pivot and we turn back and we find another route. So we're very much focused on these very short, very rapid experiments and iterative experiments. So doing a number of small experiments very quickly rather than one big one. And what that looks like is we start by generating some data. So if we're in the fog, we have to do something. We have to take some action. And that generates some feedback. So that gives us some insight. So we get some data and we combine that with our intuition and our experience. So do you know what? We've still got an important role to play as people. So as humans, we've still got a role in this system, which is to use our intuition and use our experience, use our cognitive skills to interpret what's this data telling us. And that gives us some insight. It gives us some questions to ask. And we take those questions and that insight and we use those to frame some hypotheses. So this might be a puddle or it might be a big lake. And then we can use those hypotheses to frame some quick experiments we can do to get some more data. So this might be a puddle or it might be a lake. I can take a step forward and see if the water gets deeper. And that's an experiment. That gives me some more data. Water got deeper. This means I might drown. I think I'll turn back and find a different experiment. This is the approach that we're taking in terms of rapid iteration and rapid experimentation. And I'll give you an example of how we've done this with a real challenge and a real innovation exercise in just a moment. But first of all, I just want to kind of quickly scan down the questions and just see if there's anything on there. So do you have a cap for the number of projects you work on which take you into the fog at one at a time? I think what we're doing is we're trying to start small. We don't want to overwhelm ourselves. We're still developing capability. I know one of the questions that came up earlier was how we we building the capability, how are we teaching people these skills across Atkins. And the reality is it's still work in progress. So we built what we call an innovation playbook, or a digital playbook, which describes a series of different tools that we can use, different techniques we can use in terms of innovation, for example. And we take groups of people and we dip them through a 2 or 3 day innovation exercise where we're working on a real problem with some facilitators in the room to help them. We're working at the moment on building more kind of detailed learning development curriculums around digital and around innovation because we recognize we need to refresh them because our world's changing. So at the moment we get there as the limit is our capacity to be able to kind of manage multiple experiments at the same time, but we're building that capacity all the time by building experience. And in terms of small, safe to learn experiments, absolutely, we're very much focused on that. How we fail fast, how we do safe to fail experiments that can give us the insight that we need. So just picking up a couple of questions there, but I'm keen to have another breakout session. So giving you an example of a little bit of what we're doing in Atkins, what we're working on, and what I'm finding in terms of becoming more experimental is it's a real challenge for individuals because we're taking people right out of their comfort zone. So we're saying rather than being the expert who's got the answer, be the expert who hasn't got the answer and go and do some experiments and be creative. And for the organization, it's an entirely different way of working. So next breakout, and we probably have to do this one a little bit quicker, is what are the blockers for you and the organization you work for or the organizations you work with in terms of embracing a more experimental approach to how you collaborate and solve problems?
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Adrian. You know where we're going? We're going to the large workshop whiteboard. So if you're not here, it's your last name, not your first name, so we can mix up a bit and meet some new people. Let's go. And put us back in the circle. Sorry, the reason I dragged you is I really wanted to hear the Heathrow story. So do you guys mind if we hear the Heathrow story and then we do the learnings? Nobody complained. Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, let's hear the Heathrow story. Thanks, Adrian.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're all back. So fantastic. So just really quickly, because time is flying so fast. So I just wanted to kind of give you one example of how we've done this for real. So I kind of talked a little bit high level about what we've done and some of the kind of the ideas. But actually, the best way to learn this stuff is by doing it. And we're trying to be bold in Atkins. So one of the things we're doing is trying to do this with our customers because actually, what we're seeing is that everybody else is going through the same stuff. So everybody else is kind of facing the same challenges around digital and looking to explore new ways of working. So one great example is some work we did with Heathrow that started about a year ago. You could say that was back in February last year. And what we did was put all this stuff into practice. So we started by sitting down with the client, sitting down with our client with Heathrow and said, okay, give us a challenge, give us a problem where you kind of know where you know what good feels like, but you're not quite sure how to get there or what to do to get there. So in that kind of fog space. And Heathrow came back and said, okay, we want to improve the arrivals experience. So we want to improve the experience of passengers coming into Heathrow from an hour before they land through to the point that they connect on to their next form of transport. So it could be on Heathrow Express train, or it could be getting a cab outside the airport, or getting a car from the car park, or what have you. And so what we did was we pulled together a team, which was a whole bunch of people from Atkins, but we also had people from Heathrow and from Heathrow Express, which, for those of you not in the UK, is the train connection from Heathrow Airport to the centre of London. And we brought that team together over 48 hours. We had a bunch of people in the room in Heathrow, and that was Heathrow people, Heathrow Express people, and Atkins people, and some facilitators from our innovation partners. So we work, and it's important to mention Flux, who we've worked with for the last couple of years at least, and who are really helping Atkins on this journey and helping to challenge us and challenge our thinking and support us in terms of how we're developing. So we worked with Flux, and we worked with Heathrow, and we worked with Heathrow Express, and we brought a team together in London. at Heathrow, we had a team actually on the Heathrow Express on the train, brainstorming and coming up with ideas on the train as well, as the train went backwards and forwards between Heathrow and London. We had teams, you can see there as well. We also had teams in Dubai, in Hong Kong, in Atlanta, in North America, and in India, all working in real time at the same time on the same challenge, connecting through our digital platforms, through our collaboration tools, so things like Skype and our enterprise social network and so on. And the way that we started it was, first of all, remember that piece about getting some data. So the first thing we needed to do was get some data. We need to understand the problem better. So we crowdsourced through our enterprise social network. So we've got a tool called Yammer, which you might be familiar with. And we crowdsourced and we said to people, all of our staff, 18,000 people around the world, if you're flying into an airport anytime in the next week or two, then take out your mobile phone, record a little video diary of what that arrival experience is like, what's good, what's bad, etc. So we captured together all these little video diaries that people sent through to us, and we captured together a whole bunch of other data. And we used that as a front-end stimulus for a 2-day workshop where we kind of shared that data to people, and we asked them to use their experience and their insight to interpret that and think about how we could improve insights about how we could improve the arrivals experience. And what we then did was use those insights to frame a series of experiments that we could go to test whether those insights would have any merit. Would they really make a difference to the arrivals experience? And over 2 days, so over 48 hours, we had more than 25 ideas that were pitched and voted on by the teams. We had teams then come together and cluster around the skills that we needed to develop those ideas on. And through a series of very fast, very rapid experiments, building apps, building tools, mocking up processes, going out into the street and talking to people, to real customers, a whole bunch of different activities. We ran a whole series of experiments to say, how can we test the insight that we've got? How can we get some more data to test it? And by the end of the 48 hours, we'd zoned in on one idea, which was gathering data that would help people to track their baggage through the airport and have some certainty about when it was going to arrive on the carousel and so on. And we're in the process of kind of taking that forward, and we're going to develop that and test it as a real solution in the airport to get some real interaction with people. But I think what's interesting is that we kind of did that as a live experience. So we didn't kind of go off and do that in the classroom. I don't think you can learn this stuff in the classroom. So I think what we did was we facilitated people through the experience of being really under pressure, really out of their comfort zone. And there's 2 moments in that, just really quick comments, 2 moments in that. The first is when you first bring people into that kind of process, and the look of fear. You see, kind of people are really out of their comfort zone. This is crazy. This is never going to work. We just need to engineer a solution to this in a traditional way. And then there's a moment which is a different point in each person, but there's a moment where they've been engaged in this process for a period of time where they suddenly get it. And you just see them relax. You see that it starts to make sense that actually this does help to deal with some of the challenges that we're facing. So I haven't got time to kind of describe it in a lot of detail, but I'm happy to do that another time or after we finish. But I just wanted to kind of quickly summarize what I shared with you, which is digital is not just about technology, it's about ways of working, it's about business models. We're increasingly, because of the rate of change, ending up in that fog area. And because of that, we need to experiment to get some feedback in terms of what's really happening out there. So we need to iterate very quickly and do lots of very short iterative experiments, and that helps us to clear the fog. And just a question to kind of close with from me as we go into the kind of final wrap-up session, as my slides will click forward, is really to ask, where are you? Where are any of us? Are you right there in the center in that fog? Are you feeling the confusion and the frustration and the fog and the uncertainty? Or are you on the outside hoping that the fog is going to clear? Both are rational places to be, but where are you and how does it feel, and what strategies are you using to survive and thrive in this increasingly turbulent and foggy digital world? So
can I propose we do that around the tables, and then we'll be able to close up the plan. Okay. So if you come to Bird's Eye, the easiest place to get to tables from. So click on a table or chair, and then go where somebody else is sitting. So don't go and sit on your own. So click on a chair where your bottom would go. Choose where somebody's already sitting. Don't go sit on your own. Okay, so try to choose where someone else has already gone.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi there, yeah.
Okay, so keep going. Just click on the chair where your bottom would normally go. That will get you seated in the right place.
So is that Louise and Sarah? All the technology on this.
Scotland.
Being pulled back.
Oh, we're being dragged.
Oh, we're being
Oh,
dragged.
we're being
dragged.
Okay.
Speak to you later.
Cheers.
Okay, thanks. I think that for me it was a reminder of what's going on with a lot of clients that I'm working with. So it was great. It was refreshing to hear that this is real for lots of organisations. So it was good.
But this has been really interesting. I'd like to pick up on some of the ways in which they've gone about it going forward, if there's an opportunity to. Because I think how do some of us apply it in our very, very old world environments is some of the challenge that we've.
Yes, so we've been talking about digital collaboration today, and that's very fitting that we met on QUBE to do that. And you may have seen I was sharing just now in the group chat the savings that we've made by meeting on QUBE rather than meeting physically. So 1,000 miles of travel today, which, to put it in some perspective,
How much?
means that we 176,000 miles. So that would have been 13 hours of driving each, or 5 hours of flying each. We would have burned 8.5 tons of carbon, which could heat and light a house for 623 days, which is over a year and a half. And we would have spent £3,500 because of the time we'd have to spend travelling, and over £8,000 on the travel itself. So we have saved nearly £12,000 by meeting on QUBE today rather than meeting physically.
I think that deserves applause. What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Say someone applause for Adrian at the end.
Yes. Oh, fantastic discussion. I think it's raised so many, I don't know, just great thoughts, but really interesting to hear how many people are, I think, moving into the fog, although they're doing it on tiptoes. I think people are definitely moving into it, which is great. Also, interested to think about, acquisition of new talent and what you look for as you bring that new talent into an organisation to get those capabilities in. But loved it. Thank you.
Yeah, really great discussions. It was really good to hear that a lot of the hopes that we had were the same, but also a lot of the fears as well, and these challenges and issues that we need to work through already seem to focus around that need to embrace change and change mindset within our business to embrace new ways of working. So really good that everyone seemed to be on the same level with that.
Yeah, some interesting discussions. I think for us, we talked about the fact that the digital tools and technology, it's all there, but the challenge is getting people to move into that fog and embrace it, especially more sort of senior people. I've just seen something in the chat actually around the question around that. How do we get senior people to buy in and to embrace this, especially in such a busy environment where people don't have huge amounts of free time. That seems to be quite a common theme.
Simon.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how everyone had the same thoughts, and this whole idea of going into this fog. Well, you need to vision what the future is and think about how everything's changed in the last couple of years. So actually, the future is going to be very different, and be brave enough to go and find out what that future is, rather than staying with the same old, same old.
I've really enjoyed it. It's given me lots of ideas and inspiration of how we might share some of this with some of our senior management who maybe don't quite get it. I particularly like the innovation flow, because it's got gin written all over it. I don't care what it stands for, but it's got a lot of gin on it.
I was looking for the tonic.
I'm afraid gin is rather disappointing. Gin is our global innovation network, which is the half of it's right as it sounds.
Thought it was really interesting. It's interesting to see how many people are coming onto QUBE and how it is kind of taking off, and we're definitely trying to spread it out in our environment as well, but it's good to see how you can use it in different ways as well.
Tracy.
I would like to thank Adrian for giving us such a brilliant talk today, and for everybody to come for coming. So thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. And thank you for being brilliant participants. I'm looking forward to reading everything that's on the walls. I think there's some great
There's
thoughts.
more people. You missed Trish and Will.
Sorry, Trish and Will.
Okay. Yeah, interesting because I came from a background as a scientist and then a project manager. I've always loved experimenting. It feels like I'm not going to be on the outside, that the world might be coming, some other world might be coming to the same area. So looking forward to that. And thank you, Adrian, some really interesting, inspirational stuff.
I love the optimism that Adrian put over with the digital world. There's so much doom and gloom presented to us about what's going on in the world and all the advancements that are taking over. I just think that's all so. Well, it was delightful that Adrian was giving us such a positive view of what the future could be.
Adrian, before I pass it over to Eddie, any final words also for you?
It was good, thanks. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. Sounds like you have. It was a challenge to multitask. You wouldn't believe how many little chat windows I've got open on my screen. So I've tried. But it's been fun, and it's nice to know that we're all on the same journey. I don't pretend to resolve any of it fully yet, and I don't think anybody has. So I'm always keen to hear what's going on in other people's experiences as well, which has been great to hear.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
again, a big thank you to Adrian. I knew you'd do a brilliant job. Sarah, it was better than all the others, wasn't it?
It was fantastic. Thank you very much.
Everyone, a round of applause for Adrian. Thank you very much. That's wonderful.